Welcome everybody to History, Mystery, and Beyond. I am your host Frankie Adao, and I'm here in the History, Mystery, and Beyond library to bring you a web series for the curious mind. So if you're somebody who likes true crime, cold cases, unsolved mysteries, paranormal activity and events, UFOs, conspiracy theories, urban legends, this is the web series for you. I want you guys to get involved in this web series, and during episodes, leave comments in the comment section below. I want to know what your thoughts are when you hear some of this information that I'm digging up and going down rabbit holes. I love to go down a rabbit hole. A good rabbit hole. Love it. Love it. So I want you to leave comments in the comment section below. Hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell and get updates and notifications on all upcoming episodes of History, Mystery, and Beyond right here on Channel VHF. So to start off right out of the gates for episode 1, we're going to go into one of the darkest figures probably in American history as far as like true crime goes. So we're going to be talking today about H.H. Holmes. So if you don't know anything about H.H. Holmes, it's okay. That's why we're kind of going into these series. So H.H. Holmes was dubbed America's first serial killer. It is said that at his trial, finally when he got caught, he amassed a body count of over 200 people. It is also a conspiracy theory out there that H.H. Holmes can be tied to being Jack the Ripper and the Ripper murders in London, and we'll kind of go into that later on in the episode, but just to kind of give you the grasp and the magnitude of his actions, his carrying out of murders and schemes and plots. Not only was he a serial killer murderer, but he also was this mastermind schemer and plotter to do some really fucked up shit to make money, in addition to being a fucking serial killer. I mean, you're America's first serial killer, you're like a trendsetter, so all these new or more modern day serial killers can probably tie their inspirations at some point to the model that was provided by H.H. Holmes. Now, in order to kind of get into like the mindset, which, you know, I don't know if we really want to get into the mindset of a serial killer, but to understand the progression of how they got to who they are and what they've done to gain notoriety in their, you know, the history pages of dark history, we have to start at the beginning. So we have to know who these people are, like do some research and investigation, where they were from, their family life, things of that nature that helped and kind of shape them to be the people that they are. He was born not H.H. Holmes, guys. He was born Herman Webster Mudgett on May 16th, 1861 in Gilmanton, New Hampshire, to Levi Morton Mudgett and mother Theodore Page Price. Now, they actually came over here from abroad as one of like the first American like immigrants that came over to help build like a new life for themselves, to achieve that American dream and provide a good, decent life for their family. Levi was said to be like super strict. He was a hard worker, he was a farmer, he painted houses, he traded goods in order to keep the family going. They had a big family for back then. They actually, Herman was born middle child. He had an older sister Ellen, an older brother Arthur, a younger brother Henry, and a younger sister Mary. Now I'm going to throw a lot of names and dates and time frames for you guys so we can kind of put the pieces together. You know, so just keep up. If you kind of got lost in the names and stuff like that, it's okay. You can rewind stuff to kind of rewatch it and kind of absorb it all, because it's a lot. There's in his story, there is probably the most complex story that I've come across in my research. He was kind of like a mama's boy. It was said that he really didn't, you know, connect with his father because his father was always working and again super strict. Herman had the only child syndrome syndrome. They kind of didn't pay attention to some of the stuff that he was doing. It said that he used to take small animals, so like cats and dogs and birds and squirrels, and perform actual surgeries on them. Obviously, the family's got to see something going on. You see this little boy, cutting up animals and opening them up and dissecting them, but nothing is said. So like, where's the neighbor's dog? The neighbors are looking for the dog. The dog is nowhere to be found. Not putting any emphasis on getting maybe him some help. I mean, back then mental health was different, so it really wasn't looked at like that. So they kind of just let that stuff slide. Now fast forward, on July 4th, 1978, Herman marries Clara Loving, who kind of came from a very wealthy, prominent family in that area, well-to-do, a lot of money to kind of like flaunt. They were like socialites, things like that, and he married into like some good shit. They had money, so they had a son, Robert, and Herman wanted to kind of take this whole fascination he had with the human body and biology and science, and so he went to medical school, and it was financed by Clara. Was said that he was really into science. He was like good with gadgets and planning, and so he had potential to be something very, very good in society, maybe contributing to the medical community. But his educator said that he kind of, with all that passion, he was just like an average student, so he really wasn't top of his class. He barely graduated college from medical school, but it was in medical school where he became fixated and obsessed with the human body. So he would work with cadavers in medical school, and was said to be like super like into it, and would get very agitated and frustrated if people were like kind of interrupting him in his work with when he was doing dissections of the human body. But that's where things kind of started to go really south. The medical school needed to get the cadavers so the students could work on them. So they would go through certain channels to buy, cadavers, whether it be from families, people who donated like their bodies, or, John Doe's, where the school would then get the cadavers and provide them to the students. Well, behind the scenes, Herman found a way and channels through like backdoor kind of situations at the university to actually buy cadavers at a discounted rate rather than go through the proper channels. So when Herman heard about this through the grapevine, he would go to cemeteries, to freshly new graves. He would dig up the bodies and he would sell them through the backdoor channels and make money on the cadavers. So it then became like this dual fixated fascination, one with cadavers and then two with money. He came from meager beginnings, so he wanted to kind of like keep up with the Joneses. He's married to this really wealthy woman. They have a child, so he kind of like want to keep up with the the Lovings, so to say. He would do this on a regular basis, money for tuition and things like that. So he would go to these grave sites, get the bodies, sell them to the school. In medical school at the University of Michigan, a gentleman by the name of Robert Laycock. Now, Robert Laycock was actually Herman Mudgett's lab partner, so they really got to know each other. Laycock also had like a really deep fascination with the human body, the medical community, and so they built like this strong bond over all of this. They kind of were like BFFs, and Herman pulled Robert into his whole scheme of making money off of the cadaver. So that's what they would do. By day they would be medical students, by night they would go to the local cemetery, dig up any fresh graves, sell it to the school. It was like a cycle that they did, that they worked together on, and that's how they made some extra loot, selling these bodies black market to the school. Things kind of went left for Robert and his relationship with Herman. They wanted to take this whole scheme of selling bodies to not only their school but to schools around the area looking to buy cadavers, and probably orchestrated by H.H. Holmes or Herman Mudgett. They came up with a plan to find a family. So a husband, a wife, and a child. And the plan was for them to kind of build a relationship with these families and have them take insurance policies out on themselves. And then the plan was to actually kill these people so they can get the insurance money and then take the bodies of the people that they killed after getting their insurance money and selling them to the local university med schools. And this is kind of like what they were plotting and scheming. Maybe they should have been focusing on school. This is some extracurricular activity that's fucking out there, okay? It is said that kind of things started to separate. So Herman kind of started to pull away from his relationship with Robert. Herman took out a $20,000 life insurance policy on himself. All of a sudden, Robert kind of like disappears. Where's Robert? Nobody knows where Robert is. Well, it is said that Herman killed Robert, took his body, and faked his own death, and the body that was provided to the insurance company was not Herman, it actually was Robert. So the tides changed, and he was starting to implement, Herman, his plan on the whole tying into the scheme of insurance and getting the monies for insurance, actually financing what would be some of the most heinous killings, a murder spree like no other that we saw at that time period, or probably ever in US history. Now, with all those shenanigans that he's pulling, investigators of the insurance companies start to question his whole death and did it really happen. So they're launching an investigation because there's other things that are coming up that are kind of being tied to H.H. Holmes or to Herman. Now the heat is kind of on. So what does he do? He packs up his stuff, he leaves Clara and Robert, and then moves to Chicago to build a new kind of life. And that's where he takes on the alias of Dr. H.H. Holmes. Now, if having a reputation for being a swindler or a schemer isn't enough for you, and selling cadavers and planning and plotting insurance schemes, H.H. goes to Chicago and marries Myrta Belknap in 1862 and actually has a daughter, Lucy, under this alias of H.H. Holmes. So not only is he doing all that, but he also now is becoming a bigamist, having different wives in different locations that maybe he can get something from the marriage, whether the wife is wealthy or prominent. He was kind of plotting and scheming with that too. Never divorced Clara, but married Myrta and had another whole different life in Chicago. So what he did is he kind of took that insurance money, which was like $20,000 payout. So back then, that's a shit ton of money that you can do a lot with. So to parlay that money, when he gets to Chicago, he meets Dr. E.S. Holton, who was a drugstore owner, and kind of started working in the drugstore. Dr. Holton had a wife, so he kind of, was really a hard worker for them. They really liked him. And his wife even again said that he was a very kind and loving father and husband, really dedicated to, helping the family and working hard at the pharmacy. Unfortunately, Dr. Holton's passes away, so it basically leaves Herman working with Dr. Holton's wife. Herman is seeing that there's a very successful business here. How can I take this and make it mine? All of a sudden, Dr. Holton's wife disappears. We're seeing a trend here of people going missing and being tied to Herman. He basically tells people that Holton's wife left and moved to California and left him the business to run and for him to take on, and she was never heard or seen before again. So the business now is Herman's, and he's still doing this whole grave robbing thing and selling cadavers because that's what he knows, to kind of build on the fortune that he kind of got as a windfall to him from the insurance claim and that $20,000. He seized property across the street from the pharmacy. And again, at that time, he's got $20,000. He's making all this extra money with the cadavers and stuff. So he buys the land across the street from the pharmacy, and he starts to build what's now known as his murder hotel. Some call it the murder castle. He called it the castle. And what it was is he started to build this whole torture environment where he can kind of carry out all his plans. It was said that he kind of like to, all right, so to you know, here's a picture of the layout of what he built. So you can see, you know, it goes back to where people said he was a very good planner, good with gadgets, and he hired about over 100 construction workers, and at various times they would build sections of the hotel, and he wouldn't pay them off, so he would fire them, hire new ones, and do that same thing. And he was building this whole device for himself to lure people in, and basically they were going to check in and never check out. So if you see by the diagram, he built all these secret passageways and trapdoors, hidden hallways, devices that he can use as torture chambers, and also ways to dispose the bodies. Okay, so after he built this massive murder hotel, it fell in line, and part of his planning when he was building this is the Chicago World's Fair was coming into Chicago. So the World's Fair comes to Chicago in 1893. Okay, so now this World Fairs back in the day were like the shit. Everybody wanted to come to see like automation and innovation was being done. Science, technology, that was like the buzz back then, the industrial age. So it was like very much a draw for people from all over would come. So they had an influx of people that were coming in to Chicago and laying right in the lap of H.H. Holmes. So he started to then really focus on plotting and the scheming and meeting people and manipulating them into taking insurance claims out on themselves, and making money off of their corpses when they were killed. So now let's start talking about some of the victims that started to come into play with H.H. Holmes' plan of this murder castle hotel during the height of that Chicago World's Fair. So he meets a gentleman by the name of, with the last name Warner, okay? This man actually helps H.H. Holmes unknowingly to help like investors kind of buy into this whole thing. Like, hey, World's Fair is coming. I'm building this hotel. I can use some extra money. Why don't you get involved with it? He befriends Warner and he has him like write out checks to him, and then he starts forging checks under Warner's name. Warner actually is working with him to build like this glass furnace into the bottom basement level of the hotel, so they can kind of like draw investors into like this modern like furnace that is being made. But ultimately what Warner was doing was helping H.H. Holmes build a furnace, not to use as a furnace, but to use as a like an in-house like crematorium. So where he would like take the bodies and directly, you know, put them in the furnace and try to like dispose of the bodies and the evidence that these people were coming into the hotel and never making it out. So let's talk about the layout of this murder castle hotel that was built. He would rent out the lower level of the building to like retail spaces so he can make, of course, money, because this thing was huge. So he had to finance it with all these ways to bring money in. So retail spaces on the bottom. The first floor was basically like office spaces that he would rent out, and he had his office space there. And on the third level was the actual hotel where he would rent rooms out to people. He built in like ways to trap people and to kill people, so have ventilation that would pipe chloroform into rooms where people were. It was said that there were like people who would check into the rooms, would check in, and they wouldn't be able to get out. It was like a one-way indoor, so they would be trapped in the room. Their windows, when they would open the windows, they would actually be like brick walls, so they were trapped into their room. And he would pipe the chloroform in, get them like torture them, and have them like incapacitated where they weren't able to think well. They were scared shitless for their life, and he would ramp that up, and in between he would have them to try to save themselves. He would have them like sign again insurance policies on these people, and he would keep them in the murder hotel until they either died, went missing, and the insurance companies would basically, these people were like, he was like threatening them like, hey, you want to live, fucking sign that insurance policy over to me. Now he's amassing this whole body count, and he designed the hotel or the castle to be all in one kind of kill spot, and a way of disposing the bodies. He would have them, some of them hanged. They would drop into chutes that would slide down into the basement, directly into the furnace crematorium thing that he had going on in the basement. Or he would take the bodies, they would go down to the chute, they would land in the basement. He would either sell whole bodies as cadavers. He would have different parts sold, skeletons sold to medical schools. So he was like manipulating and this diabolical scheme of really designing this. He had this whole picture of how it was going to be carried out, and it was his own kill torture chamber. One of his victims, Charles Cole, actually came into the from the World's Fair, or wanted to rent a room. Again, basically the same thing happened, where he had Charles trapped in a torture chamber, would pump the chloroform in and disorient him so bad that he had to sign over this insurance policy to H.H. Holmes, so he can basically save his life. But what happened was H.H. Holmes went even more crazy, beat him so badly that he could not sell the body, causing him frustration. So he like skinned him alive, dismantled his body or dismembered his body, and sold his skeleton, which just recently was linked to H.H. Holmes. That was in a medical school that they had to pull out because it actually was the body of a cold case with Charles Cole. So he started to really at this point lose it even more. H.H. Holmes was just being reckless with the way that he would take bodies in and skin them, dismember them, sell them, insurance money. It was a whole big clusterfuck. Another victim to talk about is a gentleman with the last name of Rogers. So Mr. Rogers was a very wealthy businessman. H.H. kind of heard about, that had a lot of money, that had a lot of investments in the Chicago area. H.H., being H.H., worked with this guy and had him come into the murder hotel, arranged this whole business deal that he was gonna lure Rogers in and kind of participate with and get his money. So H.H. brings him into an office. Okay, he locks Rogers in the office and again starts pumping in the chloroform, his whole scheme, torturing him over several days, where Rogers signed over, get this, a deal for $70,000 to H.H. as an investment, and then winds up killing Rogers and disposing of his body. Again, $70,000 back in the early 1900s is a lot of money for someone like H.H. to carry out these even more elaborate schemes and diabolical plans and build his murder castle to his refinement and to carry out as a tool, killings across the Chicago area. So the body count right now is piling up, guys. So let's talk about the Connor family, okay? Because this is where, remember the scheme I was telling you about earlier on with him and Robert, his lab partner Robert Laycock, where they were thinking about trying to find a family where they can carry out this plan? Well, the Connor family was that family that H.H. Holmes was trying to really make that plan into action. So the Connor family, hardworking family, and he basically rented space to them to live in the hotel. And in exchange, because maybe they couldn't pay the rent to its fullest, H.H. Holmes would have Ned Connor, the husband, do stuff for him around the hotel, maintenance and all that kind of stuff, in return for the rent that they couldn't pay. Ned Connor had a wife, Julia, and they also had a small child. They fit the bill of what he was looking for. He kind of manipulated them, you need me, so you need to do this, and to keep them in the hotel. It was at this point that Ned kind of told H.H. that he had a 17-year-old sister that really needed to get out of the family situation and make her own way into life. So H.H. had her come with the Connors, live in the hotel. Now it said that he got a fixation with her. Now, mind you, he's still married to several other people, no divorce, and he winds up kind of getting infatuated with Ned Connor's sister, and says that he made really intense sexual advances on her that were not reciprocal feeling from Ned's sister for HH. And in frustration, what does he do? He winds up killing Ned's sister. And it was around this point too that HH and Ned's wife Julia started to have an affair. Okay, now Ned finds this out, starts to freak out, and basically kind of leaves the whole situation, leaves Julia there with their child. And it also is said that at some point that maybe possibly Julia was pregnant with HH's child, because he not only was leaving the body counts, but he was leaving the whole kind of bigamist thing. He was just, as he was moving, along with his body counts, he was moving along with that part of things, multiple wives and children that he was just kind of putting out there. The odd thing is, when you look at the story on that, from that aspect, nobody said anything. There was no question, where is this guy? We're married and we have children, and he's just MIA. He's nowhere to be found. Finally he got divorced from Clara years later, but was still married to Murda, children all over the place. So he was a hot mess when it came to leaving a trail of his doings, you know what I mean? I think he kind of at this point was starting to not get sloppy, but arrogant about it. He wasn't getting caught, so he just kind of kept pushing things and pushing the envelope. But what does HH do to get out of the heat? On Christmas Eve, he winds up killing Julia, also their Ned and Julia's 8-year-old child, to kind of cover the tracks of things. And Christmas Eve, you can't wait till the day after or after New Year, but no, Christmas Eve winds up killing Julia and winds up killing an 8-year-old child just to cover up his shitty shenanigans. So let's talk about his next victim, Emmeline Cigrand. So Emmeline is a single girl. She comes to Chicago. It's the World's Fair. There's a lot going on, a lot of hubbub. It's the hot spot to be, and she wants to be part of that. She kind of stumbles into this hotel because she needs a place to stay. She meets HH. HH is kind of flaunting he has all this money, taking out, wining and dining her. She's always on his arm in public, and he starts to get feelings for her, probably the most that he's ever felt affectionate towards anybody. Kind of starts making moves to try to marry Emmeline, but Emmeline's not feeling it. She's just I want to be just hugged up with you and living this lifestyle, and I don't want to be tied down. I want to be married. In a fit of rage, what does HH do? When she kind of like turns his hand down in marriage. He traps her in a vault. He tortures her and fumigates her to the point where, again, she signs over a life insurance policy. He winds up killing Emmeline and saying that she went out, when people start questioning where she is, because like she's no longer on his arms, she's no longer in public with him, she just disappears. He basically tells everybody that she left him for somebody else and like moved away out of state to marry somebody else, and kind of like left him high and dry, when all the time she basically was murdered by HH. Her body sold to, you know, as a cadaver to some university around Chicago. And if you guys thought you were confused, there's even more women that are involved in his scheme. They were his target. Not only were wealthy business investors his target, but he also had a way of meeting these really wealthy women whose families had, you know, amassed like these great fortunes that he can kind of swindle in and get his hands on some of that. So we're going to talk about the Williams sisters. Okay, so Minnie Williams is a Texas heiress. She wants to kind of like do her own thing. She doesn't want to be not associated, but she doesn't want to rely on the family fortune that's in Fort Worth, Texas. So she answers an advert that HH puts in like the newspapers for a typist position. So she's like, okay, great, this is like something that I can do, you know, and make my own life. So she answers the ad and basically starts working for HH. HH finds out that she's got like $50,000 in land in Fort Worth, Texas, and starts like inquiring about like her family life and stuff. And Minnie starts telling him that she has a sister, Nanny, who kind of wants to come out and do her own thing as well. So each is like, sure, have her come. She can stay, you know, with us. You're staying with us at the hotel. So why don't you bring Nanny over and think about like staying with us and, you know, starting her own life. Meanwhile, what he's thinking, okay, what he's plotting and scheming is that if he knows Minnie has a wealth behind her in Fort Worth, if she passes away, takes an insurance policy out on Minnie, that potentially Nanny, as her next of kin, can get the insurance money from it. So what he does is he devises a plan for Nanny to come out, and what they do is he picks her up at the train station, Nanny, and starts spending time with the sister. So he's kind of like possibly dipping and dabbing in both the Williams sisters. But what he does is things start to, you know, he starts to need to, okay, this is not, you know, the whole deal here is to get these Williams sisters to sign over their fortune to me. So I need to start like with Nanny. So I need to like get rid of Nanny and get her out of the picture, because then if I get Minnie, who has more of the fortune of the family, then there is no beneficiary. He is the beneficiary. So he basically picks up Nanny from the train station, and within a week's time, Nanny disappears. It's nowhere to be found. So now the insurance policy on Nanny is kind of out there, leaving Minnie to be the sole beneficiary. Took over the Williams sisters' fortune. Winds up killing both sisters, Nanny and Minnie, but when he confessed later on, he basically said that Minnie was like the girl for him, like was basically like his heart. He loved her so much, and he regretted, like out of all of his killings and murders, that she was the one that he regretted the most killing, because he did love, in his own sick way, Minnie. Money rules, cash rules everything around me. It took over the love that he had for her, and he wound up killing her. And again, getting the insurance money and this $50,000 that Minnie and Nanny had as beneficiaries, now it was his. All that fortune, now H.H. Holmes. People are missing, and it's all circulating around this one guy, H.H. Holmes. So people start like talking, and investigations are being led not because of the missing bodies, but because like all this fraud is going on, so it raises bells and alarms for police in the Chicago area to start like investigating who this H.H. Holmes is. They actually sent police to the castle, to the hotel, and police find like barrels and like packages. For some reason they don't look at it, they just question HH about it. I mean, think about like law enforcement back then. It's not like we have today. There's no forensics, there's no any type of genetics or things of technology and ways of investigating that we have today. They question this guy, what the fuck is going on? And he basically says, oh, like nothing's going on at all. Meanwhile, in the barrels and the packages, it's actually dismembered body parts. People from the castle that come in, that check in and never check out from the World's Fair, that he's selling again. Still, all this is going on, he's still got this whole business side gig of selling these body parts, and police really take him at his word, and the investigation kind of dies out there. During this whole process of everything that's going on at the murder castle, like fucked up shit, he meets Ben Pitezel. So Ben Pitezel is kind of being like his right arm man. Ben knows what's going on. Ben sees all this stuff. You know, he's actually somebody that is going out, that HH uses as like an extension to go out into Chicago and have people come in. So Ben Pitezel is aware of the shenanigans that are happening at the hotel and what HH is up to. So Ben starts telling HH like, hey, you know, it's getting a little heated right now. People are kind of making connections with us. You scapegoated the one police investigation, so you know, we gotta like cover our tracks here. So in a fit of paranoia, HH sets fire to the top floor, like where like the hotel part is, where like everything's kind of going on, all the torture chambers, everything. He sets fire to it to kind of like get rid of like all the evidence that's going on up there. Now, after setting fire to like all the evidence and everything that was going on, Ben is telling HH, so like, we got to get the fuck up out of here. Let's just like flee Chicago. Let's go someplace else and let's like start all this stuff up someplace else outside of Chicago, because it's getting too heated in Chicago. So what HH says is, hey, let's start doing all this in Philadelphia. So he has Ben Pitezel go out to Philadelphia while he's kind of like tying up loose ends in Chicago. But before Ben goes out to Philadelphia, what does he have Ben do? He has Ben take out an insurance policy for $10,000 before sending him out to Philly to kind of like do his own thing, to scope out like how Philly is, where they can set up like building possibly a new murder hotel castle out in Philly. And Ben goes out there for several months before HH kind of meets him out there, before they start like thinking about what they're going to be doing to kind of continue this windfall of bodies and turning them over and selling them to the medical community. So Ben, being HH's right hand man, he kind of like listens to everything he says. Like, he just goes with the plan, asks no questions. Ben is out in Philadelphia. There's this $10,000 insurance policy that's taken out. So HH basically says to Ben like, hey, we're gonna take this $10,000 insurance policy and we're gonna fake your death, okay? And we're gonna provide the coroners and all that, the investigators who are with the insurance company, some random ass body of somebody in his place. So Ben, you know, being Ben and his, you know, not asking any questions, follows through with that. So they basically fake Ben's death to get the $10,000 insurance money. So while Ben is out there planning on faking his own death, the money comes, remember the Williams sisters? So the money from the payout comes in at this time. So while Ben's in Philadelphia, presumably dead, okay, or missing, HH takes the Williams sisters' money and goes out to Fort Worth because like they have property there, and he starts to plan yet another murder castle hotel. So now he's got Chicago, that's half kind of doing its thing. He has Ben in Philadelphia plotting and scheming out where they can build something in Philly. And then he's out in Fort Worth planning another. So ultimately his goal was to have like 3 functional murder hotels, where he was bringing in people, killing them, selling their bodies, and making money off of their insurance policies from them being tortured in these facilities. Fucking crazy. So now Ben has a family. Ben has a wife and he has children. When all this was going down with faking Ben's death, he basically, HH reaches out to Ben's wife Carrie and says, you know, like, hey, really, like, on the deal, Ben ain't really fucking dead. We just faked his own death and to get like this insurance money. So he's basically on the run. Like, he's trying to avoid like investigators from looking into where, you know, how did Ben die and all that. Carrie sends her children, you know, because she has some small ones at home, so she sends a couple of her older kids out to meet HH, because HH is saying, come here, because now he's thinking, HH, not only can I, you know, possibly really kill Ben, get him out of the picture, but I can get his entire family to come out, take insurance policies out on them, kill them, and get more money. Oh, and I forget to mention, because listen guys, I know it's a lot of names, a lot of dates, a lot of actions going on. While he actually, in between Murda and the Williams sisters, he meets and marries Georgiana Yoke in 1869. Okay, so again, just bringing that up because she's gonna come into play, and I totally forgot because there's so many of them that it's like, and in just a short amount of time, that it's like astounding. Like nobody caught this guy. So he's married to Georgiana Yoke at this point. Okay, Ben's wife Carrie, okay, sends the family, the children, out to meet with HH. So HH is basically like kind of like moving around. So what he's doing is he's with Carrie and Ben's daughter, is like moving around. So he will say, we're like, have them write like letters. So like basically he's telling Carrie that, okay, Ben is here, Ben is in so-and-so city, so I'm gonna go there, have the kids meet me there. Then it's okay, now we found out that he's going here and he's going there. Now meanwhile, he has Carrie and Ben's children, and he then has Georgiana Yoke, the one that I was telling you about, because he still married her. So they're all on, imagine this, they're all on these trains, okay, and they're traveling from destination to destination. The kids don't know that Georgiana is on the train with them. Georgiana doesn't know that the kids are on the train with them. No clue. Meanwhile, what he's doing is he's going to all these places that his wives or women that he was with, that he killed, that maybe their family had like property, that he was going there and he was carrying out some like underhanded shit when he was there. I know it's a lot going on, but it's the story of HH. The complexity of what went down in this whole event that happened in literally our history that we don't know about is actually like could be documented, because he was having Pitezel children write letters to their mother what was going on. There was like a trail. What HH screwed up on is those letters that he had the children write, he never mailed. So it basically documented the course of where they were, the time frame. It allowed investigators later on to place him in certain places where murders were, you know, bodies were being found, different locations that these different women's families, or they had this property that he was on like this world tour now of like murder sprees, and he would like do stuff and dismantle the bodies and like leave them in that location, go on to the next one. Now he had Carrie, master swindler, take out insurance policies on her children, because he's like, you know, in case something happens to them, you know, you should always have an insurance policy out on your kids. He kind of has them finagle to be like the beneficiary of the children's policies. And what he does, guys, is he takes the Pitezel children. He basically has these makeshift trunks that he carries on the trains with him, and he pipes like chloroform into the trunks, and he puts the kids separately in the Pitezel kids in these trunks and basically kills them. Now Carrie is not hearing anything. Like, these letters that the kids are writing are never getting to her, so now she's like, where's Ben? Where are my kids? I'm stuck here. I have no idea what's going on. Now HH is writing to Carrie and saying like, yeah, everything is fine, you know, we're chasing Ben down to try to get him so we can, you know, bring him home to you. I'm thinking I want you to come out now and join us in this crusade of trying to find Ben. Carrie's like, you know, I can't come out because of the fact that I have other kids, little ones at home. I can't come out there. Where the fuck are my kids? And like, what's going on? So HH makes his way back to Philadelphia, and it's at this point that he meets up with Ben. Now Ben has no idea that the kids came out to try to look for them. He's in Philly trying to like lay low. So what does HH do to cover the tracks? He kills Ben. Ben is like his like dude. He's like that dude that helps him out with everything. The one guy that kind of like knew everything that was going on winds up killing him to cover the tracks. The Pitezel family and Ben and the kids and all that become a very crucial tipping point for investigators to start questioning HH and tying him to like all these deaths that are happening and bodies that are piling up. They're all leading to H.H. Holmes. Okay, so now the police are really drumming up this whole investigation. They're tying Carrie, Ben's wife, to a lot of the fraud that's going on. They think that Carrie is somehow involved with Ben's whole disappearance and the insurance money and all that. So they basically arrest Carrie, Ben's wife, and they interrogating her, and meanwhile HH kind of knows this is going on. So what does he do? He flees back to his hometown in New Hampshire, tries to kind of get back with his first wife Clara. Is like, you know, this is the spiel that he gives Clara. Well, I had amnesia. I got amnesia. And I wind up marrying this woman who was my nurse, aka Georgiana Yoke, who he's still married to. He kind of is like trying to get back into Clara's good grace, and pretending like almost like he's been like out there in the world with amnesia. He has no idea about anything these investigators are talking about. When the holes in that story kind of start happening, and investigators are like, nah, bruh, this is not, you know, no, you're not gonna get away with this. He flees again. So he leaves his hometown, and then he winds up back in Chicago at the hotel, and that's where they start really digging into Carrie, Ben's wife. She kind of starts telling him like this whole spiel about them faking Ben's death, and so now it makes Carrie look really bad, you know, and she folds like a deck of cards. She starts telling them like, no, I had no idea. I was told that Ben was dead, and then I was told that Ben was alive and he was running from the law. And, you know, I sent my kids out. My kids are fucking gone. My husband's gone. I have no idea what's going on. And it leads to the investigation and the arrest of this notorious H.H. Holmes, and kind of puts a end to the murder sprees, because they then, when they arrest H.H., they go to all these places that he kind of went on this world tour of murder, and they start uncovering bodies in the basement. They find all these bodies in the basement level of the hotel, because while H.H. was smart, the furnace that he was burning these bodies in, so like a crematorium has to be like at like 3,000 degrees for the body and bones and everything to totally disintegrate. So the furnace never really got to that temperature, so there actually in the furnace was like skeletons and and shit like that did not disintegrate. So it left evidence around everywhere he was in properties that some of these ex-wives or women that he was still married to had. He had killed in those locations and stored the bodies in the basement. So when the investigators in different places started to kind of like pull the investigation together and start communicating with each other, they found a shitload of bodies along the trail and the timelines of HH, and again led to the arrest and the murder spree of HH Holmes while awaiting trial. Now the media is like, we've never had anything like this where, a trial to this magnitude of something like this. And while he was not really, like, they were still he basically was arrested because of the fraud, not so much for the murders and the bodies. Yes, they found that later on in the investigation, but why he initially was arrested was because police picked him up because Kerry confessed that something was going on. Like, yeah, okay, I was inadvertently involved in this insurance scheme. That's why they picked him up and arrested him in the first place. So the media picks up on this whole insurance fraud thing. Like, it was like what they were talking about when people first heard of H.H. Holmes back then. He kind of was like this debonair kind of guy where like the media kind of like made him out to be like this spectacle. So people were talking about him when in conversations they were talking about him. It was like the shit, like they were fixated on it. While he's like awaiting trial for all this stuff, now investigators are not only have him on trial or in prison awaiting trial for the fraud stuff, and they're finding out now that there's a connection to like bodies and all this stuff, and the information is slowly going in on the murder side of things. It was the media posing him as this like big mastermind fraud guy. So people wanted to know about him and what was going on. The media offered him to write like a memoir about like all his stuff that he like kind of was involved in with the fraud and all that. So what does he do? He sells basically a memoir and puts a memoir out there, and I'll put it in a link in the description of this so you guys can kind of check out his actual memoir that I found. Super interesting because he kind of tries to get the reader of the memoir to side with him, to understand, like, because of growing up in hardships, that there was this need and this fascination for like money and getting it by any means necessary. And he kind of was like trying to play on the sympathy of the reader and the public, and the public fell for it. The public ate it up. The public was like, yeah, he's the shit. He tackled on the system and he beat the system. And so he almost became like an underdog's hero. As fucked up as it may sound, no diss to the people in the 1800s, but I don't know that he's a serial mass murderer at this point. They just think that he's like this mastermind swindler who got over on the system. Now, investigators bring everything in together. So now it's not just the fraud stuff that he was known for. Now they have found and linked, all these investigators have linked all these dead bodies to H.H. Holmes. So he's on trial now, not only for the fraud stuff, but more so now for the murder cases. They have him on trial. Again, it's a spectacle. People are coming into the courtrooms. It's like the thing to do. Everybody was trying to flock to, because he actually was tried in Philadelphia. So they didn't try him in Chicago. They busted him in Philly. So he was in Philadelphia for trial on these murders, and he basically confessed. He basically said that there were these 27 people that they could link him to, that he confessed to. I killed these people. I'm proud of it. I got away with it. I got away with fraud for murder. Yeah, I did it. He confessed. He basically was hung during execution, and it said that, kind of morbid, but when they used to hang somebody back in the day, the noose should be around like the ear, like this portion, because it snaps the neck and instantaneously the person would die. But when they did it, and they don't know if, it's said behind, closed doors that when they went to hang him, they hung the noose in the back of his head. So again, very graphic, and that's why we have the disclaimer in the beginning. But when they hung him from the back, it did not snap his neck. He basically was asphyxiated and suffocated. And they said it took about 15 to 20 minutes for him to basically hang there and die. Not a quick death. He had that excruciating kind of moment where you're realizing you're fucking dead. It's not just like, boom, you snap your neck and you're dead. He literally died a slow and painful death, rightfully so. When he died, his last, because even a serial killer, murderer, you get your last meal, you get your last rites and all that kind of stuff. In his last rites, he said, when you execute me, I want my body encased in cement, so no one can do to me what I did to them. You're not gonna chop my body up, you're not gonna look into my brain, you're not gonna do all this stuff that I used to do to all my victims, because I'm not gonna go out like that. So basically they encased him in cement so his body could not be touched. So let's talk H.H. Holmes conspiracy theories. So the first conspiracy theory out there when people are talking about H.H. Holmes is this whole notion that H.H. could possibly have been Jack the Ripper of the Ripper murders in London. The reason why they say that is when investigators kind of were putting all this stuff that we just talked about, the names, the dates, they did find that in 1888 that H.H. Holmes did travel to London for businesses. So he could actually be placed in London around the time of the Ripper murders. So some investigators or conspiracy theorists or people like me who jump down a rabbit hole and become infatuated with this stuff, because it's so super interesting. If you guys haven't got that by now, that how complex, look at all the names and dates and travels, timelines and all that we kind of talked about. It's kind of fucking mind-boggling. Somebody can get away with all this shit, but it's possible. So when they placed him in London during the Ripper murders, the reason why the Ripper murders were such, not only because they were London's first kind of serial killer kind of thing going on, likewise we were going through at the time, we didn't know, but our own first serial killer. So the dates are kind of lining up here, guys, right? The Ripper murders were said to have been carried out from deviants and sex workers and stuff like that in the London area. But when they investigated and found the Ripper murdered bodies, they were basically surgically murdered, which kind of falls in line with H.H.'s background. But others say that yes, while he can be placed at the at the time where the murders were going on, that he did not kill that way, H.H. So H.H. killed people that he knew. He tortured people that he knew. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't some sex worker on the street that he had this aversion to, and he was going to clean the streets up of these people. H.H., while he was in the United States, killed people that he formulated relationships with, or wives or friends or business associates, where the Ripper murders were strangers. So Jack the Ripper basically wrote letters to the media saying like, I am Jack the Ripper, this is why I kill, I do it in a methodical, surgical fashion. Those letters I'll put a link to, and you can see them here. That some even say that the Ripper letters were like manufactured by the media. So there's a whole other rabbit hole that we're going to go down with the Jack the Ripper murders. But it kind of will give you some context now when we talk about the Ripper murders, so you can possibly do your research and see, is there a link between H.H. Holmes and Jack the Ripper? It's like super interesting when you kind of try to put the timeline together. This is like, I don't know guys, was super interesting. Like, I heard of H.H. Holmes. He's actually, the whole H.H. Holmes story in the Murder Castle is where they got the inspiration for American Horror Stories to do their season Hotel. If you watch it, it's basically a murder hotel. They don't really talk about H.H. Holmes. I don't think at all. I would have to go back and watch it. It's been a while, but I'll put the link down in the description where you guys can check out. If you haven't seen American Horror Stories, you're not a fan, you can maybe watch Hotel after watching this and doing your own investigation and putting the pieces together. It features Lady Gaga. It was such a great season, but I watched it before I kind of knew about all this stuff in H.H. Holmes, so I need to go back and watch it because it'll be super interesting to see how they connect H.H. to this murder hotel. So do your investigation, guys. I mean, such a interesting story. I mean, if you can get around the whole stuff about it being like murder and fraud and all that, just the diabolical mind of a person that is super intense, and it's a lot. There was a lot of people that were involved in HH's situations that he was getting himself into. Just so totally mind-boggling is how I can put it. I mean, even on his trial, his last words to the public, to the courts, to the jury, to the world was, I was born with the very devil in me. I cannot help the fact that I was a murderer. No more than a poet can help the inspiration to a song, nor the ambition of an intellectual man to be great. The inclination to murder came to me as naturally as the inspiration to do right comes to the majority of persons. So that just tells you guys that he, asks the question of us. Is somebody really, can somebody really be born evil? Is it a trait that we learn? Because if you look at HH's coming up, a lot of the times when we're looking at true crime stuff like this, the person has a very difficult, traumatic background, abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, things like that kind of would not justify any of that, but from a psychological standpoint, because you guys know I do work in the field of psychology, there is a portion of that we have to look at if we can kind of separate ourselves from all the fucked upness of the situation. That is there a tie between a starting off point in your life that is very traumatic, and not to say that people who go through traumatic experiences and don't come out to be a really good person, but it poses the question, and HH is a really prime example of this. Is it nature versus nurture? So is it the innate nature to be evil that causes someone like HH to have this expansive horror in people's lives? Or is it nurture? Is it the environment? Is it family? Is it growing up poor? Is it, the whole environmental social aspect of things that create these monsters. So a good question to kind of ask yourself when you're looking at these stories and we're talking about this, keep that nature versus nurture concept in your head. Kind of makes things a little bit more interesting if you can kind of look at things like that. Well, guys, this has been the very first episode, you could call it a pilot, of History, Mystery, and Beyond. I hope you kind of liked it. This is kind of like what we're going to do. I'm going to have a casual conversation as much as I can with all this information that I find on these super fascinating events and places and people and things that can't be explained, type of stories that we can kind of dive in a curious mindset and really like be intrigued in some of this stuff, because it's real life stuff. I hope that you guys enjoyed this first episode. Again, leave me comments. I want comments from you guys. I want questions. I want feedback on how, you kind of like this. And again, I know this one was a lot, but I wanted to jump off with the epitome of what this whole series is going to be about, and some of these stories can be really intense, so I want to know your feedback. So again, comments in the comment section. Hit the subscribe button, sign up for notifications so you can get all these great episodes that I have in development for History, Mystery, and Beyond. And until next time, I'll see you guys later.